He glanced at the map, selected a few cases from the stack with barely noticeable fatigue, and disappeared. Draco materialized in his room at the manor, immediately feeling the stark contrast with the shabby hotel from which he had just apparated. Everything here was immaculate. The polished floor gleamed, every item was in its place, and the silence that surrounded him was almost deafening. The vastness and order pressed on him, squeezing everything inside like a vice. He hurriedly began dressing in his Death Eater uniform. His fingers trembled, but his thoughts were focused on the simple ritual. Carefully tucking in his shirt, tying his tie, fastening his robe. These familiar actions grounded him in reality. After finishing the last button, he stepped to the wardrobe, took out a bottle of fire whiskey, and without hesitation, took a sip. The bitterness burned his throat, but it was so familiar, so known, that he didn't even flinch. Everything as usual.
Did you eat anything today?
Draco started and turned his head towards the voice. His mother, with a concerned look, was watching him from her portrait, but her posture remained impeccably composed, and her face was just as his father had seen it, pale, beautiful and proud, full of aristocratic dignity.
You must eat and sleep. You need strength for what you've planned. You've grown thin, with dark circles under your eyes and hollow cheeks. The other Death Eaters mustn't notice this, it's dangerous.
He stepped closer to the portrait, placing his hand on it, feeling the textured brushstrokes. The landscape behind her was sunny and peaceful. The sun reflected off the folds of her summer dress. Her cheeks were slightly flushed. And he suddenly felt a deep longing for her to have all of that now. He tried to smile, but the smile didn't reach his lips.
It's time for me to go, Mother.
Leaving the room, Draco headed to the library. He needed a book on blood magic. It was a rather complex subject, and he didn't want to make a mistake. He wanted to deal with this as quickly as possible.
Draco.
He had never understood Astoria's love for corsets with large necklines, an abundance of lace and frills. He disliked going out with her, not just because he had to pretend to be a happy couple, but also because he hated the ostentatiousness of her outfits. There was always too much of her. As he absent-mindedly examined her attire, his wife stepped closer.
I haven't seen you in a while, Draco. Maybe we could have breakfast together?
Her hand gently tried to touch the cuff of his robe. He pulled away sharply, as if he had touched scorching metal.
Know your place.
His voice was cold as steel, but he felt nausea rising in his throat. Astoria paled, but didn't retreat. Her face twisted with pain and anger.
I know my place. I am your wife. This is my place. It is you who forgets your duty as a husband to me.
He felt bile spreading through his entire body.
I owe you nothing. It's you who cannot fulfill your duty to the Malfoy line.
She froze in place. He could have savored the sight of her blush fading in an instant, her blue eyes dimming, her shoulders slumping for a long, long time. But he continued on his way to the library without looking back.